The Melody of the Clocks. Chapter 1. The Watchmaker's Daughter. In a quiet corner of England, where the cobbled streets glistened under gaslight and the chimneys whispered smoke into the misty air, stood a little watchmaker's shop. Its sign, carved from dark oak, swung gently in the breeze. T. Ashcroft, Clocks and Timepieces Repaired. The windows were lined with time itself, clocks of every size and kind, their hands frozen at different hours, as though each had chosen a moment to remember. Inside the shop, among the scent of oil and wood shavings, worked Thomas Ashcroft, a man of quiet dignity and nimble fingers. And near him, always near him, was his daughter, Clara. Clara Ashcroft was 17, with curious hazel eyes that gleamed like polished brass and hair the color of chestnut bark. She had grown up among ticking hearts of brass and steel, and her ears were so attuned to the sound of clockwork that she could hear when a cog sighed or a spring whispered its fatigue. But more than the clocks, Clara loved what lay beyond the shop's door: the world, the mystery, the endless possibility of things unseen. In the quiet afternoons, when the sun slanted through the grimy windows and dust danced like golden fairies, Clara would sit by the counter, chin resting on her hand, and watch the people pass. Gentle folk with polished boots, errand boys whistling their tunes, ladies with parasols like ships' sails upon the sea of fog. And always, Clara wondered where they were going, what stories they carried beneath their hats and bonnets. Her father would glance at her and smile softly. "Mind the clocks, my dear. They're as delicate as dreams." "I do, Papa," she would say. But her gaze would drift again, out to the street, to the world beyond. When evening fell and the last customer's footsteps faded into the fog, Clara would tidy the workshop. She dusted the shelves where carriage clocks stood like sentries, polished the glass domes that guarded delicate timepieces, and carefully wound the clocks that still had breath left in them. The chorus of ticking, soft and steady, soothed her heart. To Clara, the shop was not just a place of work. It was a sanctuary of small wonders. Yet, as the shadows lengthened, her longing grew. Beyond the shop, beyond the narrow alley, the town of Willowmere slumbered beneath the watchful eye of the great North Tower. The tower, ancient and gray, rose from the edge of the town like a giant sentinel. Its clock face had not shown the correct time for as long as Clara could remember, and at night, when the wind was just right, it was said that the tower whispered secrets to the stars. Clara often stood at the back door of the shop, breathing in the night air. The sense of damp stone and chimney smoke filled her lungs. She would close her eyes and imagine the stories the North Tower might tell, of lost loves, of forgotten promises, of hours that slipped away like sand between fingers. "Clara," her father called gently one such evening, "don't catch cold out there. Come in and I'll show you something." Obediently, though reluctantly, Clara stepped inside. At his workbench, her father held an intricate pocket watch, its case engraved with roses and ivy. "This belonged to your mother's father," Thomas said softly. His voice was a warm hush, like the ticking of a clock in the dark. "It plays a melody, but the tune has been silent for many years. I thought perhaps we could try to bring it back." Clara's heart quickened. She loved nothing more than these shared moments with her father, when time itself seemed to slow. Together they bent over the watch, tiny tools in hand, peering into its heart. The world outside faded, leaving only the gentle lamplight, the quiet workshop, and the music of their hopes. Chapter 2. the mysterious melody. The night that followed was veiled in silver fog. Moonlight softened the rooftops, and the gas lamps along Willowmere streets glowed like fallen stars. Clara lay in bed, but sleep would not come. The workshop's chorus of ticking clocks seemed louder tonight, as if urging her to listen, truly listen, to the rhythm of the world beyond her window. At last, unable to resist, she slipped from her bed, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and crept down the stairs. The shop was dark but familiar, every shadow a friend. She unlatched the door as quietly as she could and stepped out into the cool night. The town was hushed. Only the faint drip of water from a gutter and the occasional creak of wood disturbed the stillness. Clara's slippers made no sound as she walked, drawn as if by invisible threads toward the North Tower. The air smelled of wet stone and old iron, the scent of secrets. As she neared the tower, she paused, breath visible in little puffs before her. And then she heard it, faint, delicate, like the echo of a dream, a melody. It drifted from the tower high above, a tune so sweet and sorrowful that it made her heart ache with longing. The notes seemed to float on the fog, wrapping around her like a lullaby. Clara stood beneath the tower, gazing up at its dark face. The clock hands pointed to an hour-long past. The melody faded into the night, leaving only silence behind. But within Clara, something had awakened. Clara remained at the foot of the tower, the cold stones beneath her fingertips as she traced the worn surface of its great door. She wondered who else might have heard the music, or if it had been meant for her alone. The night held its breath, and for a moment, she felt as though she stood at the edge of time itself. A soft rustling came from the shadows nearby. Clara turned, startled, but saw only a figure emerging from the mist. A young man, tall and slender, with hair dark as the night, and eyes that reflected the lamplight like polished jet. His coat was simple but well kept, and he carried himself with quiet grace. "Forgive me," he said, his voice low and kind. "I did not mean to alarm you. The fog makes shadows of us all." Clara's heart, which had leapt at the sound, now steadied. There was something gentle about him, something familiar, as though she had dreamed him once. "You didn't frighten me," she said softly. "Did you hear it too? The melody?" The young man smiled, a wistful curve of his lips. "Yes," he said. "It is rare that the old clock sings. It does so only when the night is at its most peaceful, or when it senses a kindred spirit nearby." Clara's curiosity glowed brighter. "Do you know why? Why it plays at all?" He hesitated, as though weighing whether to share a secret. "My name is Edward. I watch over this tower. My father did before me, and his before him. The clock, it was made with a song inside it by a master craftsman who believed that time should soothe as much as it measures. But its tune has been silent for many years, until tonight." Clara's eyes widened. "A master craftsman? Do you know his name?" Edward nodded. "Ashcroft, I believe. Long ago." A shiver ran through her, not of cold, but of wonder. Could it be? Chapter 3. The Young Stranger. Clara gazed up at the tower, her breath catching softly in the chill night air. Ashcroft. The name echoed through her like the chime of a distant bell. Could her grandfather truly have been the one who gave the tower its song? She felt the pieces of a puzzle, long scattered, begin to draw together. Edward studied her face with gentle curiosity. "You know the name," he said, more as a statement than a question. "My grandfather," Clara whispered, almost to herself. "He built clocks that were said to have souls. Papa speaks of him sometimes, when the fire burns low. But I never imagined—" Her words drifted into the mist, unfinished. Edward stepped closer, his boots silent on the damp stones. He pointed upward to where the great clock face loomed, its hands still frozen in time. "Few remember who crafted the tower's heart," he said, "but I have read the records, and I've kept watch. The clock's song has always been tied to the Ashcroft name. When I heard it tonight, I thought at once, something has changed. Someone has come who was meant to hear it." Clara felt her cheeks warm, though the night was cold. There was something in Edward's voice, a quiet wonder that matched her own. "I would like to see the clock," she said at last, "if it would not trouble you." Edward's smile was like the first light of dawn. "It would be no trouble at all. In fact, I think the clock has been waiting for you." And so, together, they stepped toward the great oak door of the tower. Edward produced an iron key, worn smooth by generations of keepers, and turned it in the lock. The door groaned softly as it opened, revealing a spiral stair that wound upward into shadow. Clara hesitated for only a moment before following Edward inside, her heart beating to the rhythm of the unseen melody that still seemed to linger in the air. The air inside the tower was cool and smelled of stone and old wood. The spiral stair rose like a ribbon of shadow, its steps worn smooth by time. A faint glow came from Edward's small lantern, casting soft halos of light that danced on the walls. Clara's slippers made no sound on the steps as she climbed, but her heart beat steadily, as if keeping time with the silent clock above. "Does it ever feel lonely, watching over the tower?" she asked quietly, not wishing to disturb the hush that wrapped around them. Edward's voice was gentle, thoughtful. "Not lonely. The tower keeps company in its own way. It listens, it remembers, and now and then it shares its secrets with those who listen closely enough." Clara smiled at his words. She liked how he spoke, as if he too lived between the ticks of the clock, in the spaces where dreams and time met. They reached a small landing where an arched window let in a breath of night. The fog pressed against the glass like a soft curtain. Below, the town lay in peaceful slumber, its chimneys and rooftops bathed in silver light. "It's beautiful," Clara murmured. Edward nodded. "It is, especially when the world is quiet and time seems to pause." He led her onward, and at last they reached the clock chamber. The great mechanism filled the space, a wonder of brass and iron, of gears and levers, of wheels that had not turned in many years. It was like stepping into the heart of a giant, one that had been sleeping for too long. Clara's eyes shone. She stepped closer, drawn to the craftsmanship, the delicate balance of strength and grace in the design. "This is his work," she said softly. "I can feel it." Edward watched her with quiet admiration. "Perhaps, with your help, we can wake it." And in that still moment, with the stars watching through the tower windows, Clara felt as if she had stepped into a story written long before she was born, and that now, at last, it was hers to finish. Chapter 4. The Secret of the Clock. Clara stepped nearer to the clock's great heart, her breath held as though any sound might wake the giant from its long slumber too abruptly. The brass gears were dulled by time, but still beautiful, each tooth and spoke a work of art. She reached out, her fingers hovering just above a slender cog, feeling the faintest breath of cold metal. Edward stood beside her, his lantern casting soft pools of light that caught in the polished edges of the machinery. "My father tried to mend it," he said quietly. "So did his father." But the song remained silent. They said the melody had been lost, or that the clock's spirit had gone to sleep. Clara tilted her head, listening, as if the clock might whisper its wishes to her. Then she smiled, a small, secret smile. Perhaps it isn't broken at all. Perhaps it has simply been waiting for the right hands, or the right night. Edward regarded her with wonder. "You truly believe that, don't you?" She nodded. "My grandfather used to say the clocks are like people. They grow tired, they keep secrets, they need care, but most of all, they need to be understood." She slipped the shawl from her shoulders, rolled up her sleeves, and gently touched the edge of the nearest gear. With Edward's help, she examined the winding mechanism, the music box drum hidden deep within the works, the tiny hammers poised to strike their notes. The two worked side by side, their words few, their movements quiet and patient. Outside, the night deepened, and the fog wrapped the tower in its soft embrace. At last Clara found what she had hoped to find: a spring, no longer broken, but merely tangled, waiting to be set free. With delicate fingers and Edward's steady light, she eased it back into place, the way a gardener might guide a tender vine. And then, in the hush that followed, the clock shivered. A soft click, a sigh of air, a tremor that ran through the brass and steel like a heartbeat returning. Edward's eyes met hers, wide with hope. "Wait," she whispered. And then, the first gentle notes of the melody, shy and sweet, rose into the air, as if the clock were remembering how to sing. The melody unfurled, like the petals of a night-blooming flower, delicate, slow, and filled with wonder. The notes were soft as a lullaby, rising and falling, like the breath of the sleeping town below. Clara closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. It was a tune both new and familiar, as though she had always carried it in some hidden corner of her heart. The music spoke of time's gentle passing, of moments treasured and lost, of hopes folded into the quiet of the stars. Beside her, Edward stood very still, as if moving might break the spell. His lantern flickered, casting golden shadows on the clock's face, where the hands began to stir, slowly, hesitantly, as if waking from a dream. "It lives again," Edward said softly, wonder threading through his voice. Clara opened her eyes and smiled. It was never truly gone, just waiting. Together, they watched as the clock's great pendulum began its swing, steady and sure, marking time once more for the town of Willowmere. And with each swing, the melody grew a little stronger, filling the tower chamber with its tender song. For a while they said nothing. Words felt too small, too sharp, for a moment so filled with quiet magic. Instead, they listened, and in that shared stillness, something gentle blossomed between them, a bond as natural as the turning of the gears, as certain as the chime of the hour. At last, Clara spoke. "Thank you, Edward, for trusting me. It is I who should thank you," he replied. "The clock's heart beat again because of you, and mine, I think, beats a little differently now, too." His words were simple, but they filled Clara with warmth. She turned back to the window, where the first blush of dawn touched the fog with silver. The night was ending, but the melody lingered, a promise that would carry through the day. Chapter 5. A Night Full of Stars. The dawn's light crept softly through the tower windows, turning the lingering mist to pale gold. Below, Willowmere stirred in his slumber, unaware of the quiet miracle that had taken place above. Clara and Edward stood side by side, their eyes lifted to the great clock face, now gleaming as though polished by the first rays of morning. The hands moved with slow, steady grace, and the pendulum swung with purpose, as if to say, "Time, like hope, always finds its way." For a moment neither spoke, content in the stillness. Then Edward, his voice as gentle as the morning breeze, said, "You've given the town a gift it will never know how to thank you for." Clara smiled softly. "It wasn't just me. It was waiting to be found. And perhaps it was waiting for us both." They descended the spiral stairs together, the lantern's light no longer needed as the day grew brighter. Outside the tower, the fog was lifting, revealing a sky of soft blue, with the last stars fading like dreams at waking. At the foot of the tower, Clara turned, gazing up at the ancient stones. The melody still echoed faintly from within, a song that would mark the hours with kindness and peace. Edward looked at her, his dark eyes warm. "Will you return?" Clara's answer was a smile, gentle and sure. "Yes, whenever the clock calls me, I will come." And so they stood, watching as the sun climbed higher, bathing Willowmere in light. The night had given them a secret to share, a secret of time, of music, of hearts quietly drawn together. The days that followed were touched with quiet wonder. Each evening, as the sun sank beyond the hills and shadows lengthened over Willowmere's cobbled streets, the clock in the north tower played its gentle melody. The people of the town, though they knew not how or why, found comfort in its song. Children slept more soundly. Worries seemed a little lighter. Even the chimneys puffed their smoke in time with the tune, as though the town itself breathed more easily. Clara returned often to the tower, sometimes with Edward, sometimes alone. Together they tended the clock, winding it, polishing its brass, listening to its heart. And as the nights grew colder and the stars brighter, a quiet friendship blossomed between them, one as natural and steady as the ticking of the clock they cherished. One evening, when frost silvered the rooftops and the moon floated high and full, Clara stood at the window of the tower, gazing out at the sleeping town. Edward stood beside her, and for a long while they said nothing, content in the stillness they shared. At last Edward spoke, his voice soft as the night breeze. "Clara, do you believe time can hold more than hours and minutes? That it can hold feelings, memories, hopes?" Clara's gaze stayed on the stars. "Yes," she said, "I think time is made of all those things, and maybe, when we care for it, like we do this clock, we help those hopes and memories to live on." He smiled at her words, and in that moment, the bond between them felt as timeless as the stars themselves. When she returned home that night, the clocks in her father's shop seemed to tick more sweetly, as if sharing in the quiet joy she carried. And as she lay in bed, listening to the far-off melody of the tower clock, Her eyes grew heavy, and she drifted into dreams filled with starlight, music, and the gentle turning of time. The end.